All ready, Lauren? Lauren, ready? Are we ready to go? Well, good evening, everybody, and welcome to the Edina City Council meeting. It is Tuesday, September 5th, 2023, 7:05 p.m. And I think you got a preliminary, had a preliminary conversation with our senior communications coordinator. And as you know, we are doing these meetings through COVID and post-COVID in a hybrid sort of way. You can come to City Hall and testify with regard to public hearing matters, or if there's a community comment you want to make on a matter that's of concern to you that's not on the agenda on a particular evening or scheduled for a future public hearing, you can certainly make those comments and express those concerns. You might be watching on cable TV or at edinamn.gov live meetings or on facebook.com/EdinaMN, and if you are, you'll be able to participate in both community comment and the public hearing. We have one public hearing matter this evening, and the call-in number will come up on the screen here momentarily if you're prepared to call in either for community comment or for a public hearing matter. And there's the number there, 786-496-5601, the conference PIN number. Punch that in, hit the pound sign, and then you'll speak to an operator, and they'll bring you to the council, and then our senior communications coordinator will bring you into the council. Press *1 to speak, as you can see on the screen here. And that community comment portion of this meeting will come up fairly quickly. Same number for both community comment and for the public hearing. So having provided that information, let's call the meeting to order, and let's ask our clerk, Sharon Allison, to call the roll.
Councilmember Agnew. Here. Councilmember Jackson. Here. Councilmember Pierce.
Here.
Councilmember Risser. Here. Mayor Hovland.
Here. Next is the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thanks, everybody. And next we have a meeting agenda. Is there anyone on the council or at the staff level that wishes to modify the meeting agenda in any form or fashion? All right, is there a motion to approve the meeting agenda as published?
So moved.
Second.
Member Jackson moves. Member Pierce seconds the approval or the adoption of the meeting agenda as published. Any further discussion? All those in favor of adoption of the motion as stated say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Carried. Now we are back to community comment, folks. If you're listening in, we'll talk to our fellow residents that are in the audience that may have a concern they wish to address the council with first, and then we'll go to the virtual world to take people's comments that might be calling in. But let me first of all ask, is there anyone in the audience this evening that wishes to address the council on a matter of concern to them that's not on the agenda or scheduled for a future public hearing? Okay, you gave me that head fake there. I thought you were going to get up when you moved in the chair, and I thought, oh, okay, all right, here we go.
Put this here for right. You're going to zoom in on it? Yep. Great. This is ready?
Yep.
Great. Good evening, Mayor and council members. My name is Steve Brown. I live at 5528 Halifax Lane. I'm here tonight not to address you directly, as you're familiar with the information I'm about to present. I'm speaking to the community at large. I'm a member of the Edina Neighbors for Affordable Housing, a local advocacy group for affordable housing. Part of our work is educating people about affordable housing. Tonight I'll be talking about who lives in affordable housing. Sometimes the term affordable housing conjures up images of projects like the infamous Caprini Green projects in Chicago. This is certainly not the type of affordable housing that is built today in Edina. So here in front of you is a chart that presents several scenarios for who might qualify to live in Edina's affordable housing. To qualify for affordable housing, you must earn less than 60% of the area median income. For a family of 4 living in Minneapolis, St. Paul, Bloomington area in 2023, this means you must earn less than $74,500 a year. Using salaries from the Bureau of Labor Statistics for the Minneapolis, St. Paul, and Bloomington area, this chart shows several scenarios of who could live in Edina's affordable housing. If there's a single wage earner, as you can see on this chart, they might be a middle school teacher earning $67,000, or a nutritionist, or a special education teacher. If there was one full-time wage earner and one part-time wage earner, you might see a combination of a full-time firefighter and a part-time teacher. Combined, they would earn a little bit less than that $74,500. You might see a full-time nursing assistant or a part-time administrative assistant. And if you had 2 full-time wage earners, you might have a pharmacy technician and a hostess, or a locksmith and a waitress. The point here is that to live in Edina's affordable housing, someone, and most likely 2 people, in a family of 4 must have full-time jobs. Thank you for your time, and I'll leave this chart if anybody needs to have it in their possession.
Thank you, Mr. Brown. All right, is there anyone else in the audience who wishes to come forward? Okay. Let's turn now to, Lauren, do we have anybody online that wishes to address the council on a matter of concern to them?
We do have a few people on the line, but they have not indicated that they would like to speak. So at this time, I would ask them to please hit *1. And it looks like we do have one that just indicated they would like to speak. So operator, can you please unmute their line? And just a reminder to the caller to please state your full name and address for the record. Thank you.
Hi, everybody. My name is Daniel Eaton. I live at 5712 Parkwood Lane. And I would like to kind of piggyback off a little bit of what my neighbor, Mr. Brown from Halifax, who's been very vocal in his support for neighborhood affordable housing. My request of the city is a little bit different. I think it goes along with what Mr. Brown is saying now. It goes along with making sure that neighborhoods really get what they want and get what they want from Edina, out of their neighborhood, and they're doing it in a planful, mindful way. So I think part of this discussion is to make sure that people understand, again, that this city and the city council works for the people, and as such, that the people, the neighborhood, the residents should have a voice in what happens in their community and a say in what happens in their local neighborhood. So I would like to make a request of our city council that a neighborhood node, small area plan, for the 19.2 acres, starting from 5780 Lincoln, going north in the Bredesen neighborhood, with the Parkwood Knolls neighborhood bordering this area on the east, be approved by the city council to proceed. We need to make sure that this area is redeveloped with a mindful and very planful, and most importantly, a neighborhood input in a democratic process that should go into this, a transparent process. We want to make sure that this planful approach, again, to this development is done with the neighborhood input and is not led by our developers. Again, this area could be an amazing and inspirational area with the right planning and right neighborhood input. There's many residents who are interested in establishing the Bredesen Knolls neighborhood small area plan, but the residents of this area want to get the formal request initiated in hopes that we can get it approved by the city council so that the 9 to 12 month process can begin to get our node established. So please, city council, we're asking you to start and kick off this process. Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you, Mr. Eden. Anyone else online, Lauren?
Yes, we do have other callers on the line. I would like to remind them to hit *1 if they would like to speak. It doesn't look like anyone has indicated that they would
Okay.
like to speak, so I believe it's safe to
Member
proceed.
Pierce indicated that there was somebody else out in the audience who wished to speak. Yes, sir. Feel free to come forward. And if you don't have an overhead, I would say using one of those side podiums is best, and give us your name and address, and you'll have a little lighting system in front of you there. I think go to the side podium. I think you get a little bit better microphone set up there, and then you'll have 3 minutes.
I didn't get a copy of the agenda, but I assume this concerns the rezoning of the property on Londonderry for low-income housing. Do I have that right?
Yeah, it's not scheduled. There hasn't even been an application for anything
No,
on Londonderry.
But that's why we're here tonight, to hear from people on that, and I want to be heard.
Yeah, you're welcome to
My name's Jeff Anderson. I live at 6205 Parkwood Road. I live there with my wife, Martha. I've lived there for over 30 years, and I've raised 2 daughters in the Edina school system who are grown, and one lives in Edina and one lives in California. In our neighborhood, there's a lot of concern about this development and the rezoning. If you drive through our neighborhood, you will see the yard signs, and they're plentiful, and I'm sure the concern is far more than just the people who have the signs out. My concern is once you start rezoning, where does it end? I'd like to come in here and ask for my lot to be rezoned. And I live on a 2/3 acre lot. I got 40-some feet of side lot, and it would be perfect for a twin home, so I could have a daughter move into the twin home next to me, so that I wouldn't have to go to the old folks' home any sooner than necessary. I'm not going to get my lot rezoned for a twin home, even though it would be perfect. It's 4,000 square feet the way it is, but you're not going to rezone it for that. So you start rezoning for one purpose, or giving conditional uses for one purpose. Where does it end? Do I get to come in and get my lot rezoned too? Because it sure would be helpful to me, and it would be helpful to a lot of people. And I have a neighbor that lived on the northeast corner of Schaefer and Parkwood, owned an 1.5 acre lot. And before they tore down that lot, he went to try to get that rezoned for 2 lots. And he said, no, it's single family, the zoning's in place. So my feeling is there's a zoning ordinance put in place. It serves a purpose. And we shouldn't be going around changing it to accommodate different special interest groups, regardless of regardless of the need. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Anderson. Anyone else in the audience? Okay. All right. Lauren.
Mayor, we do have one caller who has indicated they would like to speak.
Very good.
I would like to remind the caller to please state your full name and address before you begin speaking. Operator, can you please unmute their line?
Hello, this is Joanne Anderson.
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, thank you. My name is Joanne Anderson. I live at 6236 Knoll Drive, and I also grew up on Olinger Circle before Bredesen Park was created. So I've been around since 1969-ish in this area. And I would like to piggyback on what the last 2 residents talked about. And I think there is a lot of unknown information going around on what is and isn't happening, and it would be very helpful to have more information provided. And secondly, I also understand about why zoning is set up the way it is. There's a specific reason why it's set up. And I know the council had a similar situation, I think it was for the last 2 years, up by the Keegan gas station, or I guess it was a car repair. I tried to buy that 20 years ago to build a Dairy Queen, and I was told I couldn't buy it because it was zoned only for a gas station. And that's, again, why it was denied, I believe, for the restaurant that tried to go in the neighborhood. And I think there's good reason why zoning is set up in a specific neighborhood because of traffic and all the other things. It doesn't mean we aren't in agreement on low-income housing, and that was a very good explanation by the previous person on what that means. And the last thing I wanted to say, and I went online into edinamin.gov and just looked at things like density in the city for affordable housing, and the highest one I could see was about 113 net acres. It was something like in 5 acres, but the point being that this density, from what I can tell of the past allowances, this is far more dense than any other low income or even any kind of housing that would create lots of traffic issues and so on. So again, my point being that I think we need to understand, as people that live here and have lived here for 40, 50 years, that what is going to be built, why, and again, going back to the no zoning, the change in the zoning doesn't seem like it's the right place for this to be built. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Ms. Anderson. Yes, come on up, ma'am.
Good evening. My name is Annie Doty, and I live at 5737 Duncan Lane. My husband and I moved to Edina 6 years ago. We love our community, and we've been impressed with both the city council and the city staff that we've worked with. Tonight, I'd like to piggyback on what a couple of people said. I am here to ask you to consider establishing a small area plan for that 19.2 acre area. I think as I looked back at some of your other work, it would be similar to the small plan area plan for the 44th and France neighborhood, which you commissioned in 2018. The purpose of that plan, and I quote, was to provide a vantage point for reviewing and evaluating future redevelopment and development proposals to ensure that they contribute to, rather than detract from, the unique character of the area. I'd just like to remind you that just like 44th and the France neighborhood, our neighborhood also has a unique character. And I hope the City Council still believes that our resident voices are valuable and will include them in shaping the future of our neighborhood, as you did 5 years ago for the 44th and France neighborhood. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Ann. Anyone else? Okay. Anyone else online?
No one else on the line has indicated that they would like to speak.
All right. All right. Our practice is that we'll take these comments under advisement, and the city manager will respond on them to them 2 weeks from now at our next city council meeting. And now we will turn to the city manager, who will provide responses to the community comments that were made at our last city council meeting. Manager Neal.
Thank you, Your Honor. We had 5 folks testify at community comment at our August 15th meeting. One was Joe Kavanaugh, who talked a little bit about his concern over the relaxation of cannabis laws and its impact on youth mental health, and encouraged the council to establish as restrictive as an environment as possible with regards to cannabis in the community when you have the opportunity to do that. We had a concern expressed by Janie Weston about wildfires. Particularly, she commented about the wildfires in Maui and wondered how we would respond to that sort of conflagration here. I asked the fire chief that question, and he said we of course have strong winds, just like Maui has strong winds. We don't have the same mountainous territory as they do on the island, and that makes a big difference in terms of winds and how winds are focused. So we don't have those same conditions. We don't have the same kinds of fire environment as they do on the island. We have a lot more roads and streets that create fire breaks than they do on the island in the city. So that's an important difference. That also allows the fire department to focus on structural protection of streets and less on man-made or natural fires. In regard to public warning, the city utilizes multiple routes to warn folks of emergencies like this. Even though we think of those sirens as tornado sirens, they're actually outdoor warning sirens, and they're used for all different kinds of emergencies. We also have the ability through RAVE and iPause, two software-based communication tools, to push messages out to folks in a geo-fenced area. So if that may include the entire city, it may include just a neighborhood in the city. So we can push messaging out into people with smartphones. But really, the sirens are most important. We also having our own dispatch center is also very important in terms of local people who are in the community and can have a better connection to the emergency, whatever that emergency is. But we have a well-trained, well-staffed professional fire department that trains regularly with our neighbors, and so that has the ability. Edina residents are served not just by the fire departments that we have, but by the fire departments of the Southwest Metro area, and we think that's an important benefit. We also had concerns expressed at our last meeting by two folks around panhandling. And I wanted to ask Mr. Venny if he could talk a little bit, Lieutenant Venny, if he could just talk a little bit about panhandling from the police perspective, and sort of what are the challenges of handling panhandling concerns in the community. Lieutenant Venny?
Yeah, thanks, Scott. Well, the courts have ruled that panhandling is protected by the First Amendment. So that makes it a little challenging from time to time. But we do have a lot of services available that we offer through our social worker that can help mitigate some of these things as well, too.
So when we have panhandling concerns that are expressed about interrupting traffic concerns, those are some things we can address, not because they're panhandlers, but because they are creating a traffic concern of some kind. But when you see the folks that are standing at the top of an exit ramp and they're not impeded traffic, those folks are not folks that we're going to be able to address using kind of customary law enforcement techniques.
And we will address any safety concerns as well, Scott. So, like if there's a family out in the median, we're going to go out, we're going to address it, and we're going to try to make sure that we don't criminalize that. Again, we talked about some of those social services that we have available, and we're going to emphasize that aspect of it as we move forward.
Finally, we had
on that topic, thanks for the comment about being in the median, because I know I've seen a small family, a mom and dad and a small child in a stroller on 66th and Valley View on that narrow median strip. And so it kind of begs the question of when the First Amendment gets rubbing up against public safety, how do you go about handling that from a judgment standpoint? And because it does seem very unsafe with a stroller up there and an umbrella and two adults.
It does. And it puts us in a can't put us in an awkward spot, right? So just with policing in 2023, we have to be very careful about how we move forward and be sensitive to what the family is going through. And I think that's where we're emphasizing the seek to understand before we have to go in and try to force somebody out, is that really try to work with them. And that's where having an in-house social worker, I think, is key to try to get those resources there to try to help and encourage and really explain the safety aspect of it while we try to get those services for those individuals.
Good. That prompt anything from our fellow council members I want to do as a follow-up? Councilmember Jackson.
We have interpretive services available as well if for some reason the people aren't English speakers.
We do. We have, if we don't have somebody on staff that's able to communicate, we do have a language line available to us. The exciting part about where we're going with our staffing in the last few years is we do have several folks on board that are able to speak multiple languages, which is exciting, and it provides a huge opportunity for us to be better equipped with the changing community that we have.
Okay, thank you.
Good. All right, back to you, Manager Neal.
That's all I have.
All right. Okay, thank you. And next is the consent agenda. I know Member Risser wanted to pull item 6J. Anyone else on the council wish to pull anything off the consent agenda? With the exception of item 6J, is there a motion to approve the balance of the items on the consent agenda in a single motion?
So moved.
A second.
Member Jackson moves. Member Agnew seconds the adoption of the items on the consent agenda in a single motion with the exception of item 6J, which we'll handle in a moment. Any further discussion? All those in favor of adoption of the motion as stated, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Carried. And now 6J was potential approval of an increase in the utility franchise fees for both CenterPoint Energy and Xcel Energy. I'll turn it back over to Member Risser.
Thank you. My concern, this is the second reading, and at our last council meeting, we had the first reading, and we did talk about trying to make the fees more equitable, and so making them based on energy usage, and I think that idea has a lot of validity. I'm new to council, relatively speaking, and so it's interesting how we go from the first reading to the second reading, and the second reading is now here on the consent agenda, and it has not changed. But when I went back and I listened, it sort of sounded, like in the future we will work on this. But I really do want to know, do we have any firm plans for moving forward on trying to get more equity into this? Like what is the pathway? How much time will pass before we will see this issue again?
Yep. Manager Neal, I just addressed this issue this week, so I think Manager Neal, go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor and members of the council. Yes, I think what we said last time was that we are still trying to learn the process that Minneapolis went through and that Hopkins was discussing going through. And there are several other cities in the Twin Cities that have a franchise fee that's not a flat fee, based on just the unit, but a variable fee that's based on the amount of energy consumed by the unit. I think the concern that we've talked with other city colleagues about is that is a structural change, and we want to make sure that the per unit assessed fee is pretty easy to predict, right? It's X times Y equals Z. But when you begin to shift it into an energy consumption basis, we don't really know how to predict that quite as well. We wanted some time to spend to make sure there are lots of ways that we could make this revenue source more progressive or more balanced, depending on how the council would want to do it. But we feel like we haven't had sufficient time to talk about that. We think it's a good idea. We proposed that we were going to come back to you probably next fall anyway, with the change for the upcoming 2 years, that you give us during that time. We would come up and in getting input from council, we would come back to you with a difference, a structural change in our or perhaps a structural change in our rates at that time.
Member Risser, any follow-on?
I appreciate that. Thank you. I would ask one of my colleagues to advance this.
Yeah, thank you. Is there a motion to approve the increase in the utility, suggested increase in the utility fees, franchise fees for CenterPoint Energy and Excel Energy embodied in ordinance number 2023-16 and 2023-17 on the second reading basis?
So moved.
Second.
Jackson moves, Member Pierce seconds. The motion is stated. Any further discussion? All those in favor of adoption of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay.
Carried. Yeah, I think this was a good suggestion you had, Member Risser, that we'd look at this. We talked about it at our last meeting, and I think Manager Neal, you'll stay with that and understand better what they're doing over in the city of Minneapolis and elsewhere, and try to make some modifications over time. That takes care of the items on the consent agenda. We've got one item on the special recognitions and presentations portion of the agenda. We don't have anybody here to receive the proclamation, but the proclamation is called Welcoming Week, and designating September 8th through the 17th, 2023 as Welcoming Week in Edina. And that proclamation reads as follows. Whereas Welcoming Week is about bringing neighbors together across lines of difference to build relationships and work together on shared goals. And whereas the city of Edina is home to people of all backgrounds, the vision of the city is to ensure all people have the opportunity to thrive and all residents feel welcome. New residents are a vital part of our community, along with our longtime residents bringing ideas, starting businesses, serving in civic roles, working in industries, and contributing to the vibrant diversity that we value so much. And whereas to focus on diversity as an asset, our community must strive to create a culture and policies that ensure everyone can belong and thrive. And whereas by fostering a welcoming environment for all, regardless of immigration status, race, ethnicity, place of origin, English language proficiency, religion, income, gender, sexual orientation, differing abilities, age, and other factors, we enhance Edina's health, economic prosperity, and well-being for current and future generations. And whereas to maximize the resources and impact, the City of Edina is collaborating with the cities of Bloomington, Eden Prairie, Richfield, and Savage to collectively celebrate Welcoming Week and have several activities scheduled throughout the week. Now therefore be resolved that it says James B. Hubbard, I would say the City Council of the City of Edina does hereby proclaim September 8th through the 17th, 2023 as Welcoming Week in the City of Edina. Is there a motion to adopt that proclamation?
So moved.
Second.
Member Jackson moves, Member Agnew seconds the adoption of September 8th through the 17th, 2023 as Welcoming Week in the City of Edina. Any further discussion?
If I may.
Yes.
I just want to talk about for a second, how important immigrants are to our community. And I looked up the source of this Welcoming Week proclamation, and they talked about how cities can do this. And one of the things they said, they help cities welcome immigrants and encourage receptivity. And I think that there are going to be some activities, but I also think that we ought to always think in our policies about how we make this a welcoming city. Immigrants are a really important part of our economy, and one thing that I've talked about is looking at wage theft and workers' compensation protection for projects in the city. A lot of the abuse comes because people are not English speakers and they're new to our country. And so it's very important to me that when people come here for a better life, that they are able to do so in an equitable and friendly manner. So
Thank you, Member
I'm very
Jackson.
excited about this.
Anyone else? All right. All those in favor of adoption of the proclamation as read, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Carried. Well, Welcoming Week is just about upon us, so we'll keep that in mind. And watch for those activities as well. There'll be some things posted online, I'm sure.
Yes.
We have one public hearing matter this evening. We're now going to switch to that part of the agenda. Our Community Development Director, Carrie Teague, has the matter, and it is a zoning ordinance, potential zoning ordinance amendment involving multifamily housing in the city's PCD1 and PCD2 zoning districts. It is a public hearing, as I mentioned, and we're going to take testimony tonight. We're going to take it online. I'm assuming the council will follow our usual practice over the last several years, and that is that we would leave it open for public input, the matter open for public input, in-person input this evening, in addition to online input, and then we'll continue the action to September 19th. But I think Director Teague will talk about that as part of his presentation. Director Teague, please.
Yes, thank you, Mayor, members of the council. So this ordinance comes to you this evening as recommended by the city attorney. We have a conflict in our code. We have on the right side of the screen here, under section 612 of the zoning ordinance, listed as a conditionally permitted use in our PCD zoning district is multi-residential uses. Multi-residential uses are defined as double dwelling units, residential townhomes, residential buildings containing 6 or fewer dwelling units, and residential buildings. So really under that definition, a single-family home could be considered a conditionally permitted use in that district. Those types of structures typically don't have commercial uses in the first floor or basement. So under that provision of the code, the city of Edina has approved a couple of multi-residential projects through conditional use permit, that being the Edina Flats and the View 44. On the left side of the screen is section 618 that states that no part of any dwelling unit shall be located in the basement or first story of a building in a PCD 1 or PCD 2 district. So the purpose of this ordinance is to clarify those two conflicting sections of our code. Just to quickly highlight where our PCD 1 and PCD 2 zoning districts are located. Generally, they're in our smaller commercial nodes. There's a couple of small sites in the greater Southdale district, but primarily these sites are located in our smaller commercial nodes. So in front of the council this evening is a couple of options for your consideration. On the left side is option A, that would allow multi-residential uses in the PCD 1 and 2 districts as a conditionally permitted use. So it would clarify that section of the code. Option B, which is recommended by the Planning Commission on a 6-0 vote, and this is the staff's recommendation as well, is to clarify that within those zoning districts, the basement and first floor of any multi-residential use needs to be commercial. So the language that you see on this side, the code would read multi-residential uses as long as no part of any dwelling unit be located in a basement or on the first story of the building. The language that's highlighted in italics, that was recommended to be added to the code by the Planning Commission. And that's to clarify that the first level and basement within those types of multi-residential buildings be listed as permitted uses in the PCD 1 and PCD 2 district. So within your staff report and what we looked at, the Planning Commission, when we were considering the amendment here, we looked at, again, these districts are located in our small commercial nodes where we've done small area plans. So there is a lot of language that's consistent throughout. I'll go through this quickly because this is not the recommendation of the Planning Commission. But we do have language in those plans that specifically supports multi-residential use as a standalone project. Two of the guiding principles of the Valley View Wooddale Small Area Plan. First is that sites should be allowed to transition to housing from business use in response to changing market demands. Second, in talking about graceful transitions, that plan says generally lower density multi-residential uses provide a more graceful transition to single family homes than commercial land uses. The 50th and France Small Area Plan, this is the conceptual development plan. The areas highlighted in yellow are indicated as conceptual standalone residential developments. 44th and France has some similar language that talks about the type of housing that it's looking for in that district. Even some of the renderings have townhome type developments on the edges. 70th and Cahill plan talks about residential or mixed use buildings. So again, back to the options. The staff and the Planning Commission are recommending option B. The main concern that the Planning Commission had was wanting to protect, especially in those smaller commercial nodes, commercial development, our existing commercial uses, that if we change the code to make it clear that the standalone multifamily would be allowed, then we could slowly over time lose that commercial type of development. So with that, again, staff and the Planning Commission are recommending option B. And as the mayor mentioned, we're suggesting that you close the public hearing at noon on September 11th and then continue action to the September 19th meeting. And with that, I can stand for questions.
Would you back up to that second to the last slide again in that language of option B? Towards the end, it seemed like it was a little bit confusing.
The language that was added by the Planning Commission?
When you get down into the highlighted language, as long as no part of any dwelling unit be located in the basement or on the first story of the building, and that's that next sentence, the first level in the basement within a multi-residential building must be permitted uses in the PCD1 or PCD2 district. Multi-residential uses are also, okay, all right. I understand the sentence now.
Yeah, so that the following after where it says multi-residential uses are also subject to the following.
Yeah, must be permitted uses.
Yes.
Is the language I was looking at, and I read it too fast. All right, thanks. Other questions for Director Teague at this point in time? From council members? Member Risser?
Just a clarification. You mentioned View 44 Edina Flats, but Rowett Valley View is also a similar situation, true?
That is true. That was part of the Edina Flats property as well.
All right, thank you. All right, this is
I have one question.
Member Agnew.
So some of the feedback that we got via Better Together Edina, I think, was under the assumption that PCD1 zoning would be going away. Can you speak to kind of just like the overall, again, just to reiterate, the intention of clarifying this due to maybe some of the gaps or the loopholes?
Yes, that is exactly the intent, is to clarify that use within those districts, and the PCD1 district would stay.
All right. This is a public hearing matter, and we've got quite a few of our fellow residents in the audience tonight may be interested in this or just couldn't live without coming to a city council meeting in the middle of the summer. So let's open this up for public testimony. And if anyone in the audience wishes to come up and testify regarding this matter, you're welcome. Remember that you've got 3 minutes. You'll get a yellow warning light when you got 30 seconds left. We like to treat everybody the same, so that's why we use this clock system. Make sure everybody's got about the same amount of time to make their comments. So if anybody has a concern based on what they saw at the Planning Commission or they heard in Director Teague's presentation, feel free to come forward.
Good evening, Janie Weston, 6136 Brookview Avenue, and I live very close to View 44 apartments and the Edina Flats and the former Burley's lot that is half of its foundation is now in. You all know how I feel very strongly about why we're discussing this tonight. Frankly, we never should have gotten to this point. This has been a huge waste of time, of lawyer costs for the city lawyer or the lawyer advising the city. There is no conflict between 36-618 and 36-612, the conditional uses for PCD1. The city has shown with previous large projects that this is clearly understood. The Lorient at 44th and France was done according to what our city code states for PCD1. The Market Street project, the same thing there too. It's commercial uses on the first floor. So why did this happen for the City Flats property, View 44 Apartments, and now the Burley's project? And by the way, that is not a graceful transition to the neighborhood. It is a huge footprint on the lot. If you haven't driven by, now that the foundation for the west duplex unit is in there, imagine what it will be with 2 of those on that lot. It is huge. It is not a gentle transition. So there is no conflict. The city has shown that they understand how these 2 parts of our code are supposed to be used and read and followed, and they were not. And I think a discussion needs to be happening now. Why? Why are these projects in my neighborhood, and perhaps, I don't know, are there more that are PCD1 big projects elsewhere in the city? It's a good question, but the ones that I see every day, why have they happened this way? And it does not make Edina look like it's all on the up and up and following their own zoning codes and ordinances. So
thank you, Ms. Weston.
It's a big question. Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening.
Hi, I'm Nancy Stemson. I live at 6629 Parkwood Road. Before that, I lived at 6216 Parkwood Road. And I grew up on Crescent Drive in Edina, graduated from Edina High School, as did my husband. Part of the reason we live in Parkwood Knolls is because of the park-like setting and the big lots. There are 2 problems with this apartment complex. If it's affordable housing, we need to have more services for those people close. There isn't a grocery store, there isn't a pharmacy, there's no public transportation, there's 1 bus stop. So this isn't going to help. And it doesn't matter if they were luxury apartments. It's too many people in the neighborhood. The traffic, which I worked with you on this, Mayor, when 169 was closed and Parkwood Knolls was such a mess. It's going to be too much traffic in the area, and also these people who live there, will the kids be going to Edina High School, in the Edina school system? Is there enough school space for these people? It just seems like a rather bad idea. There's not enough room. There'll be too much traffic for our kids, for us walking, for whatever. So I think that you need to think about this and not just making it seem like Edina doesn't want to have affordable housing. I think you need to realize what you need to have if you're going to have that many people in one spot. But it's a residential area, and having all the apartments is just not a good idea.
Thanks, Ms. Jensen. I think we'll move her thoughts into community comment. But well, yeah. Anyone else? Okay, let's check online and see if we have any of our...
So we do have a few callers, but they have not indicated that they would like to speak. So I would like to invite them to please press star 1 if you are interested in speaking. It looks like we have 1 person who has just now selected that. So as a reminder to the caller, please state your full name and address for the record and proceed with your comments. Operator, please unmute the line.
Hi, everybody. This is Daniel Eaton again at 5712 Parkwood Lane. It's really interesting to hear my prior 2 neighbors talk about something that I think is, again, part of the elephant in the room right now that we need to have a conversation about, and part of the reason why this is even happening. I think one of the things that my first neighbor was articulating was, where's the accountability? Where's the accountability for the developments that have currently been developed that clearly don't stay within the current zoning. And again, I agree with her. I think the current zoning is pretty clear. I think right now what we're doing is a little bit of a cover for the decisions that were made. And so where's the accountability for the decisions that were made? The other piece of this, and for my neighbor Nancy Stetson, who got up, very heartfelt, but I think this just shows the type of confusion that we're putting into our neighborhoods, our residents, our citizens of Edina, who depend on this zoning to be done by experts and people who should understand this and should be guiding our developers in ways to make sure that they're making decisions that are good for our neighborhoods, good for our residents, good for the future residents. And that means following current zoning. That's also part of the reason why planning is so important. And the big amount of time, the big amount of taxpayer money, big amount of resident input that went into the comp plan. We need to be following that. We need to be using that. We need to be updating it in a thoughtful manner. But again, I would really ask the City Council, number one, it's a very easy vote on this for option B. I think the city staff has done a great job coming to that conclusion. I think the Planning Commission a couple of weeks ago also came to the right conclusion. So I would just ask, again, that we make the right vote and continue to go with option B. But I would ask for a little bit more. And I would ask for more transparency, more accountability. How do we make sure that this does not continue? I've never been so involved in a city as what I am now, and it shouldn't have to be this way. I pay a lot of money in taxes to live in the city, to have very competent staff, city council leadership who should be making these decisions, because there should be a well-planned, thought-out comp plan. At least that's what I thought. So again, I would ask that we continue to go with the option B that was shown by member Keegan, and I would also ask for more accountability, and please, let's end this confusion to the rezoning situation that's currently happening all over the city. We need to put a stop to it. It's not right for anybody. It's not fair to our residents. It's very developer-centric and very developer-focused. So again, thank you very much for your time. Please vote for the option B, and let's also put Edina back on the right track, resident-focused, not developer-led. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Mr. Eaton. Anyone else online?
There are a few more callers on the line, but once again, they have not indicated that they would like to speak. I would recommend waiting 1 minute to see if any indicate, and then we can proceed. So I will start the timer now.
All right, folks, if you're listening online, you'll be able to send in written comments, of course, but this is also your chance to speak to the council. Anyone else in the audience? Okay.
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Jason Kaufman, 5231 Green Farms Road. Live in Parkwood Knolls. I would just encourage you to vote for option B. I think it's the right thing to do. Secondly, I'm going to make it really short. You should all take a drive through Parkwood Knolls. And to second the confusion of what's going on, 90% of those yards have signs in them because they don't understand what's going on with rezoning. I know we've talked about it not being approved, but something was approved in order to go to the state to get in the line for funding. Everyone's really confused, and no one understands what's going on, really. So please clarify what's happening. If you're going to rezone, what are you rezoning? So again, I'd encourage you to just drive through once, see how many signs are all around, and the people who don't agree with what's happening. So thank you.
Yeah, Mr. Kaufman, thanks. Yeah, we agree with you. It's confusing with the process with the state. The applicant was here for a sketch plan where they come to the Planning Commission and the City Council for some ideas, but they've got to go back and decide whether or not they're going to file an application for approval. But in the meantime then, because Minnesota Housing Finance is on its own timetable, you have to indicate to them whether or not you'd support the project, whether or not we've gone through the process or not of going, of making sure that everybody's voice is heard and everybody's had a chance to be heard.
Yeah, and I was here at that meeting. I was right over there, and I heard how the confusion was and how eventually it came to, well, let's reword it and vote for it so that we can get in line, but yet we can always not vote for it later because that's council, not housing commission, however that works. So again, it's really confusing, and it's not really seeming like following the rules. Not really. People felt like they're not getting their word in. People aren't being able to talk about it because something was approved or changed, even though you guys may not ultimately vote for it. So anyway.
Yeah, understood. We feel kind of the same way. And as I said, until there's a preliminary approval application filed, until they come in and file an application, there's no project, started. There's, other than what we've done, which is adding to the confusion. So, thank you for that. Anyone else? All right. Anyone else online? Yes, Lauren, you had your finger in the air. I don't think you were testing the windage.
I believe that we have another person who indicated that they want to speak. So please state your name and your address. Operator, can you please unmute the line?
Hi, everybody. This is Daniel Eaton again. Mayor Hovland, I do have to just back up my
Mr. Eaton.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm sorry. You've had your time, and it's not a debate or a conversation to be had. You've called in twice tonight, and this. I'm sorry to cut you off, but we give people equal opportunity here, but not multiple opportunity. So, if you have anything you want to put in writing, if you have anything you want to put in writing, go ahead and put it in writing. All right. Thank you.
No other callers have indicated they want to speak. Thank you.
Anybody else in the audience? Okay. All right. The motion, this staff recommendation is that we close the public hearing at noon on this matter on September 11th, 2023, and continue the action to September 19, 2023 for potential action by the council. Is there a motion to that effect?
So moved.
Second.
Member Jackson moves. Member Pierce seconds the motion that we close the public hearing at noon on September 11th, 2023 in this matter and continue the action to September 19, 2023. That's a city council meeting that evening. Any further discussion? All those in favor of adoption of the motion stated say aye. Aye. Opposed? Carried. Okay. Thanks for coming in tonight. Oh, good input. Okay. Let's move on to reports and recommendations. And let me get back in the agenda here. And folks, too, if you want to supplement your spoken testimony with written testimony, feel free. You'll have that opportunity until noon on the 11th. All right, we've got Resolution 2023-56, accepting donations on behalf of the City of Edina. Is there a motion to approve that particular resolution?
So moved.
Second.
Member Jackson moves. Member Agnew seconds the adoption of Resolution 2023-56, which would accept donations on behalf of the City of Edina. Any further discussion? All those in favor of adoption of Resolution 2023-56 say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Carried. Very nice, generous gifts this reporting period from people in our community to the Park and Rec Department. Diane Kaplan-Burke, a generous gift of $3,200 for a bench at Centennial Lakes Park. And then Ciara and Kelly, $350 for a tree at Arneson Acres Park. Thank you to those residents for their generous gifts to the city. Really appreciate it. Okay. And then we've got a resolution to deal with regard to a potential preliminary rezoning on 5100 Eden Avenue. And Director Teague, you've got this matter.
Yes, thank you, Mayor, members of the council. This one was continued from your August 15th meeting. This is the Eden 100 project across Highway 100. Just as a reminder, the proposal is to tear down the existing 38,000 square foot office building and build a 136 unit apartment. 14 of the units within the project would be for affordable housing. There would be a 3,300 square foot retail element on the first level and a 3,500 square foot park along Arcadia. The request is a preliminary rezoning from planned office district to planned unit development. So there's a zoning ordinance established specifically for this site. The PUD ensures the sustainable building policy is met and that the affordable housing units are provided within the project. A question was raised at the last council meeting about comparing PUDs in the vicinity. This evening, I included in the packet, and I also handed it out. Probably the most similar project is the Avador on Eden, just to the west of the project. And so you can see the comparison. The proposal, the Eden 100 project, would have 10-foot setbacks. The setback to Eden Avenue is just 4 feet on that Avador project. The density of the Avador is 100 units per acre, similar to the project in front of you this evening. Building height of the Avador is 6 stories and 80 feet. The proposal this evening is 7 stories and 82 feet. Building coverage is 75% at the Avador, 68% as proposed tonight. The floor area ratio is a little bit less at the Avador, maybe because it's the senior housing and the units are a little bit smaller, but that one is at 2.2%, and the proposal this evening is 3.2. Those are the most significant comparisons. Both staff and the Planning Commission is recommending approval on a 6-0 vote for approval of the preliminary rezoning site plan and the replat. The replat is simply combining all the existing lots into one. So we would recommend that you adopt Resolution 2023-53, subject to the findings and conditions that are outlined, and then first reading of the ordinance as included in the packet this evening. The Opus Development Team is here this evening, should you have any questions for them. And with that, I'll turn it back to the council for discussion.
All right, Director Teague, very succinct presentation there as a follow-up to our hearing matter that we had. Questions for Director Teague or for any of the applicant representatives? Yes, Member Jackson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So this is for Mr. Teague. Will there be a park dedication fee with changing the plats?
There will not be. That's state law that says we can only collect park dedication if they were creating a new lot, doing a subdivision that way. So there's no park dedication.
Okay, thank you. And then this is for the developer. I was looking at the plans and I went over to the site, and you may have covered this, but I'm at the retaining wall. How is that going to be affected by the redevelopment?
Sure. Good evening. Nice to see you all again. Thanks for having us. In the current plan, the retaining wall would go away. So if you remember without the visual, it's a little bit more difficult, but the lobby actually will be at the grade of about the sidewalk today. So the retaining wall does go away. And we did have a preliminary conversation about, we had a similar situation over in St. Louis Park on a project where a brand new retaining wall had went in, and we essentially worked with the city and said we'd be happy to have you haul the wall away if you'd like to reuse it somewhere else, but we're kind of preliminary on that, but we'd be happy to have those conversations.
Okay.
Director Milner?
We do those type of walls all the time, so we've talked initially about salvaging that wall and railings and using it somewhere else. And in fact, right across the street, depending on the timing, we need a wall adjacent to that railroad tracks for the park property or the park proposal and the restaurant proposal. So either use it there or somewhere else in town.
Okay, terrific. And then the setback is from the lot line, but the retaining wall is not the lot line. Is that correct? Or about where does the lot line fall in relation to that? Like I said, I was pretty confused looking at it.
Yeah, that retaining wall, I believe, is inside the property, but it's pretty close to the lot line along there.
Okay, so we could sort of assume that that's close to the lot line. And so then the setback at that point is about 10 feet?
At its closest, again, it's kind of hitting at an angle, so that corner is 10 feet, but then it pulls away in both directions.
Okay, terrific. Thank you. That's very helpful.
Welcome.
Other questions? Member Risser?
Would it be possible to get the pyramid of discretion up on the screen at all? I don't know how hard that would be. I have done more digging into PUD and how neighboring municipalities use PUD. Edina really is, in my opinion, an outlier. And instead of creating a PUD district where we articulate the uses that can happen in it and set up a construct in which you can have developers submit plans, we don't do that. We bundle, okay? And so when this came to the Planning Commission, they essentially were asked to do in one motion 3 things. And that was approve rezoning, which in the pyramid of discretion is the green bar at the bottom. Approve a subdivision, which is the yellow bar, and this is not a subdivision. And I have not seen in any of the packet material exactly. I mean, it sounds like we're just going to make one lot. It's only going to be one lot, all right? And then at the very top, site plan, which is red, and you're not supposed to, really question that unless you have a very strong reason. So we're bundling all of these different layers of the pyramid of discretion in one vote. We do not, other places decouple this. And there's really compelling reasons to do that, because when you do a process like this, we are actually putting into our code the name of the developer. We are putting the specific site plan. That is part of the resolution that we are approving when we approve this rezoning. And we can think of other projects that we have done this way, other PUDs, and some of them have gone along smoothly. Others, they haven't developed, and then they've just kind of sat, because the only project that can move forward is that project. And I think that's a problem. And I think, when you look at places, like Bloomington will put a cap on how long an approved PUD project, and that's different than the district zoning, can be viable. So you have a year to get it off the ground, and then you have to apply for an extension if that's what you want to do. So that is one of the reasons why I cannot approve this project tonight. But the other reason has to do with this comparison to nearby PUDs. And this also gets to the point that we're doing things very differently. While other communities set parameters for just how much the rules can be bent and flexible, we don't do that. So, for example, for FAR, for Bloomington, it can go 0.5%. So you can have 150% of what the FAR is. Here, look at what we're doing. Okay, we're going from maximum floor area ratio of 0.50 to 3.2. That's 680%. That's huge. I talked about the building coverage going from 30 to 68, and how essentially what we're doing is we're treating a lot that is 1.36 acres as if it was 3.2. And that is huge. And so I really did appreciate the comment early during public comment of where does this end? And so, and then as I look at this chart, okay, yes, there's precedent. We have done this. But does that mean we continue to do this? And I can't support this, because it really is advantaging a developer significantly. So those are my comments. Thank you.
Thank you. Other comments? Member Agnew?
I have a question, and thank you to Member Risser for sparking this question. Director Teague, do you know, when we're talking about other cities and their use of PUD, it sounds like some others use it differently, or right? Potentially, Edina is a little unique in that regard. How do other cities ensure the compliance with the sustainable building policy and ensure inclusion of affordable housing within their buildings?
Yeah, without doing any detailed research, I'm not sure how they could, well, especially the sustainable buildings policy, without a PUD, I don't know how you would enforce that. It can't be done through base zoning. State law says that you can't go above and beyond what the building code says for sustainable building. In terms of affordable housing, some cities have adopted that into their ordinance. Edina has partially with our PCD zoning districts, but the other part, when it's not in a PCD district, is to utilize the PUD and write it right into the PUD ordinance.
Thank you. That's helpful context.
Member Risser?
A clarification, however, you could create a base PUD district and require affordable housing as well as requiring sustainable building practices without coupling that with a specific site plan and a specific developer. That could be part of a base PUD zone that you were creating so that more than one developer could submit a plan. It could be baked into that. You don't have to have a specific site plan.
That is true. You don't have to have a specific site plan. But the way Edina, when we drafted the PUD ordinance, we wanted to specifically include a site plan in the approval to avoid that bait and switch kind of a deal. Changing a building design, as long as they met an overall or general setback, they could do that. The way Edina does it, tying a specific site plan, building elevations, that's the way that we ensure that a developer will build what they say they'll build.
Director Teague, Member Risser raised the issue of other communities having a timeline in which you have to start developing a project or you lose the right to develop that project. We have that too. What's our timeline?
We do. Ours is 2 years from the date of approval. A lot of cities are just 1 year, but we are 2.
All right. And Attorney Kendall, I'm thinking about different ways in which PUD is used and in the various communities that you represent. I don't find ourselves to be an outlier. I just find us to use PUD in maybe a way that's consistent with some of the other cities that do it, or other people may have districts, PUD districts. Maybe for Greenfield that works, but when you have a fully developed community, I'm wondering if you could comment on different ways in which you've seen PUD being used in the various communities that your firm represents, or even on a broader basis in your legal practice.
Mayor, I've seen it done both ways. I don't think Edina is completely an outlier in having a specific site plan. I know of other communities that do it that way as well. So I think there's pros and cons, but the pro of having it that way is they're required to build exactly what they promised to build. So when you do the discussion, negotiation, give to get, you can be guaranteed that you're getting exactly what you bargained for if you made that site plan the approval. That way, if they don't build what they said they're going to build, they're in violation of their zoning approval, and you can address that. So there's pros and cons, and it can be done the other way. It can be done with just a general district. It's just a policy decision for the council. But it's not unusual or improper to approve a particular site plan. It's just one of the two options.
And Director Teague, as I understand it, as we've gone through this process with this particular project, the reason we did it under a PUD was to be able to assure the affordable housing that we wanted at 10% of the total number of units, and also that they would build to our sustainable building policy.
That's correct, as well as the public space that they're dedicating out front.
Member Pierce.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. So maybe a different question based on Member Risser's questions. With this particular project, what construct would we have in place before this project comes to the council that would dictate some of the PCD issues as it relates to what we're talking about today?
The other option that they could have pursued would be a different zoning district, maybe PCD is that district. There would be a number of variances that would have to be tied to it, the setbacks, the FAR, the height. et cetera, so it would be a rezoning with variances. One thing, the Planning Commission is going through its 2024 work plan right now, and we've been wrestling with this whole PUD issue and what our base zoning says, and it's quite a disparity. There's quite a difference between what our comprehensive plan allows and what our base zoning allows. So our plan hasn't been finalized, but we've been discussing taking a look at our existing base zoning districts and changing those standards. Maybe not going the maximum, I don't know how that exactly looks, but to try to get some of our base zoning districts more in line with our comprehensive plan.
Okay. Because so just my feedback, a lot of what Member Risser articulated resonates with me because it does feel like at times when projects come forward, and I've said this before, kind of feels like we're making it up as we go along. So it depends on what project comes in for that site, right? How we figure out the zoning. Sometimes even the setbacks might be different, right? And then when those come forward, we have to take that information and we make a decision based on what we think. For this project, I actually think it fits in the Grandview area. I think it's a good use. I think they've listened to the feedback and they've adjusted the plan to have it fit. And so I would support it, but yet I still feel like what Member Risser articulated. And so it does. So my question is that we can't resolve that tonight, and we can't resolve it this year probably. But I think it is incumbent on us to ask the question, and you started to articulate it, what do we need to do so that when residents look at rezoning or we look at a project, that there's a more crisp process that we're following. And then when we make our different decisions, it's still, right, we're using some discretion, so we will continue to do that. But are there ways that we can establish processes so that as we execute, it doesn't feel like a bait and switch, or it doesn't feel like we're kind of making it up as we go? Because we're going to have the same issue with Lincoln Drive. And I can almost promise you the folks who came from Parkwood Knoll that left were talking about option B for PCD 1 versus PCD 2. And I'm sure they're thinking if we vote for and approve option B, that means something to that project. And it actually won't, right? And so when they talk about the confusing nature of what we're doing, I just think this particular meeting is a microcosm of what folks are talking about, and they're each looking through a different lens. But I think the way Member Risser articulated it, we do need to figure out how can we take some of that confusion out of the process while we still will have to utilize that discretion on a project basis many times.
Thank you for that. Member Jackson.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I want to give a little of my historical perspective on this. When I first joined the Energy and Environment Commission, we had a joint meeting with the City Council, and Bob Stewart was on the City Council at the time, and we were like, you have to do something about climate change. You have to do something. And it's like, well, give us something to do. And so we went round and round in circles because there was nothing that we could do to really, I mean, the city property in this city is just a tiny percentage of our emissions, and it's mostly from the private sector. And at this point, buildings are the biggest source of carbon emissions and greenhouse gas emissions in our city. And so the only way that we can affect that is through our green building policy, our sustainable building policy. And so the PUD gives us the opportunity to do that. And what we also found, and this started with 7250 France, they came in with a project and they wanted to do something innovative, and the city simply didn't have the tools to do that. So we created these small area plans to give some guidance, but they're plans, they're not prescriptive. And by using the PUD, we can do two things. We can change land use to reflect the neighborhood aspirations in the small area plans, but also to then require the sustainable building policy. And there are other ways of doing affordable housing, but this is a very good way to do it. But in the process, so this was all created 5 years ago. It's brand new. It's not well established. It hasn't been going on for 30 years. And there are some glitches in the process. But it's new, and we're learning. And we're learning as things come forward. And that's really uncomfortable to not have a established, straightforward way. But before we had the give to get through the PUD, we didn't have tools to affect our climate footprint, or our greenhouse gas footprint, in the way that we do now. And so it is confusing, it is complex, and maybe it can be streamlined more. And so I'm really pleased that the Planning Commission is going through this exercise so that isn't such a huge disparity. But it's also a new thing, and we are learning as we're going. But it was a tool that was desperately needed at the time it was created. So to 5100 Eden, I think this is great. It does fit the Grandview area, and you were very responsive to our comments. And I look forward to seeing what it's going to be like. Thank you.
Thank you. Member Agnew.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think that the conversation that we had just prior to tonight's meeting for our work session, which was about engaging the public and getting public input and how we want to continue to improve that, because I think it is evident that it's confusing, right? And we want to make it easier. We want to make it more accessible. And so I do appreciate all of the discussion on that, and I implore us to keep this front of mind and keep trying to improve. And I don't think that we're going to get it overnight. I don't think that some of the adjustments that we're looking to make are going to be the solve for this, because if there were a clear solution, like, I think that we would have implemented it already, right? What we're trying to do, and I think COVID taught us a lot, is how can we increase the number of ways that people are providing input? But sometimes that in and of itself can make it more confusing, because people get snippets of information in different ways, and they might see something online or they might see something in a public forum, but not get that full context in any one of those ways in which they may be engaging, right? And so I think that that's one of those reasons that we're having this challenge at the forefront now, and why it is so top of mind. So I think we need to continue focusing on that. And I love that this is on the Planning Commission potential work plan for next year, because this is coming up a lot, right? And when we hear from residents about, the time that is being spent from our lawyers and from our city staff and from our volunteers and from ourselves as the city council, I think that that's evident, right? The amount of time that we've spent talking about this means that there's a pain point and an inefficiency in the process as it is today. And still, right, when then you look at this individual project, the things that I like about the project, and I was reviewing all of our materials last night, I think that Mr. Brown did a really great job when he was providing that public testimony last time of speaking to all of the highlights that this project brings to this area, right? It's walkable to a grocery store. There's not a ton of places within our community where we can build housing that's walkable to a grocery store, to coffee shops, to an area, right, a district. And I think that we really need to use that to the fullest advantage that we can, which when I look at this sheet then, that is the comparison to nearby PUD, which is the Avador on Eden Avenue. Yes, we're looking at what is something else that's in that area, what fits within that district. And I do see, compared to the city standard for POD, yes, we're pushing some of those we're going above and beyond, right? But it gets us to what we want to see, which is the same sustainable building policy. It's affordable housing, and it's creating more of that density in those areas that that are going to be frequenting the new restaurants and the new parks that we're investing our city resources into as well, right? If we build those but don't have that housing to support it, those are going to be underutilized, and we want that district to be as successful as possible. So those are some of the reasons that I will be supporting this tonight, but I think that it's evident we need to continue working on our process and in the underlying zoning that we have across the city.
Thank you. Thank you for that. I was just thinking back in time when we established the PUD so that we could request higher standards for some elements of a development. And the PUD allows us to deviate from the zoning standards for a specific development without changing the zoning for all the property located in that same zoning district. So we happened to go down that pathway. I think it was primarily at first in the Southdale area. We called it give to get, but it means that you really can establish other standards that wouldn't otherwise exist in POD 1, for example. So the developer comes in, they've got choices. You can go with the zoning code, POD 1, and here's what you're going to have. You're going to have a variance for this, variance for that. Maybe that works. But then they don't have to do affordable housing. They don't have to follow our sustainable building policy. If people decided to give them to award the project on that particular type of basis. What we know is that from use of PUD, we can deviate from that zoning standard, and you offer them that opportunity by saying if you do certain things that this town thinks are important, and they've been well expressed by my colleagues here, I think, that might be a possibility. That would resonate with our planning commission, that would resonate with our city council. And we can get these higher standards established for some elements of the development, and that's exactly what happened in this particular circumstance. I thought Member Agnew did a great job of explaining what all those benefits were. So regardless of whether you're going into this building on a market rate basis or an affordable basis, you're right there where you can walk to everything you need except a movie theater. And maybe they'll have one in the building. I don't know.
You can walk to the movie theater.
Well, you could.
Yeah, it's about a mile.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess you're right. I know a guy who walks from there down to Red Cow, so that's past the movie theater. So, I get it, but there are pathways you can take under the conventional zoning, or you can use the PUD, and that's what we've provided for in our code. That's what our council chose to do in the past to get these things that we thought were important in our town. And it is happening with a little bit of randomness because projects will come up here or there, and depending on how the code looks and what you tell them is possible, our land use experts, they can go one route or another. And I'm personally pleased they chose to go the PUD route because we're going to get to sustainable building policy. As my colleague, Member Jackson, pointed out, we're going to get them building to that standard, and we're going to get affordable housing, 10% of the units, and this is a difficult thing in Edina. So I'm going to be supportive of it as well. In terms of whether or not these can be coupled or decoupled, I think that if there's on the pyramid of discretion, if I don't see any problem approving all three in that single motion, all three elements of it. If we approve the things where we have the greatest amount of discretion, naturally flows that the other one will probably come along with it at the top of the pyramid where we have very little discretion. So right. I think that's why you coupled them the way you did. So is there a motion to adopt resolution number 2023-53 approving preliminary rezoning, a zoning ordinance amendment, preliminary site plan and subdivision replat for 5100 Edina Avenue and grant first reading of ordinance number 2023-15?
So moved.
Member Agnew moves.
Second.
Member Pierce seconds. The motion is stated. Any further discussion? Yes, go ahead. Member Risser.
I appreciate the comments of my colleagues. I would like to add, yes, we're getting sustainable building, but we're also getting a sea of concrete. And we do not have the amount of open, pervious green space that we would ordinarily have if we didn't allow the builder to go from 30% coverage to 68% coverage. And, so one of the things that we keep hearing is decisions should be data-driven. League of Minnesota Cities came out with a beautiful piece on how trees are infrastructure. Before our last meeting, at our working group session last time, we heard about how limited pervious surface and how we're getting so much of this elimination of green space is having an impact on our water. And so with that, I do want to read, this is point 2 under purpose and intent for the PUD, promote a more creative and efficient approach to land use within the city, while at the same time protecting, promoting the health, safety, comfort, aesthetics, economic viability, and general welfare of the city. And I think it really is concerning that we are so comfortable eliminating pervious surface. And I hope as the Planning Commission tries to bring the comprehensive plan and the zoning together, that does not continue this trend of really reducing pervious surface and Edina's abilities to have trees. Because I do live in a neighborhood where we have had so many projects that are like over 2 times the size of the buildable area. We had a meager tree canopy to begin with, and now it's just being continually punched, through more holes, and so less and less, more and more, less and less shade, more and more heat. So anyway, just getting those ideas out there. Thank you.
So,
Jackson.
For the record, there will be more trees that are replacing the trees that are being taken down, and this will have stormwater enhancements that the current parking lot does not have. So I disagree with your comments.
I doubt if there's any pervious surface on the existing site. And I think, I was in favor of tall and skinny with a lot of green space around it, but when you explained that the parking wouldn't work, that made sense. So I think these things have to be looked at on a one-off basis, depending upon how the site works and functions. And so I was comfortable with that. But thanks for those comments. Okay, we got a motion and a second. Anybody need me to restate the motion? Okay. All those in favor of adoption of the motion as stated, say aye. Aye. Opposed?
Nay.
Carried. Thank you, gentlemen. It was really a remarkable transformation in the process. I thought it was really helpful. I think colleagues feel the same way. Okay, that's the, wow. You are, Sharon, you are right on top of it here. We're all right, we've got a commission correspondence, so that's the end. I don't think there's anything that's come in that we need to be mindful of until we go to real time. Let's see. Manager comments. Manager Neal.
Thank you, Your Honor. Just 2 quick comments tonight. One is just to give council and community notice or invite you to attend the police department open house. It's going to be on 9/20, so September 20th, I think, is a Wednesday, from 4:30 to 7:30, right out here in our parking lot. We're anticipating a lot of folks to be there that night. Parking will be creative, I know. The next night, the very next night, on the 21st, Edina League of Women Voters is holding their school board candidate forum here in this space. And I do want to recognize and appreciate their cooperation. We had a little bit of a scheduling conflict by having both of those events on the same night, which would never have worked. So we did talk to the League of Women Voters. They did agree to move to the next night. We appreciate that. But they'll be in this space then on Thursday the 21st. That's all I've got. Thank you.
All right. Member Risser, want to lead us off, please?
Just a quick comment on sod versus seed. And I did see on Nextdoor that there was a comment about a new resident to Edina being concerned about the use of sod. And I do know that in our climate action plan, we do have a statement that we do want to see people being able to move away from traditional lawns. And so I really want to put a plug for anything the city can do to make it possible for residents to have more options and not to feel, in this case, the person felt like they were pressured to use sod, and it may be that sod was the only answer, but there are a lot of ground covers that are pollinator friendly, viable. So, I really would hope that we could move in the direction of the climate action plan and ensure that anytime grass is being torn up or the ground is being torn up, when streets are being redone, people do feel comfortable and know that they don't have to use sod. The other thing is that there is some evidence if the sod is being grown on a field that was fertilized with sludge, it may have PFAS in it. So that's a concern. So just, things to really think about. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Member Jackson, working on your list?
Well, it prompted me. I saw a notice, and I was trying to get some facts. There are still grants available for rain gardens out, I believe through the state, through the Department of Natural Resources. But I couldn't Google it fast enough to figure out what it is. But if you're interested in building a rain garden, there are public monies available to build a rain garden, and I'd encourage you to do so and get pollinator friendly as well. So that's it. Thank you.
All right, good. Thank you. Member Pierce.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a couple of things. I do want to commend the city and the council. I do think that I think we're going in the right direction with some of the conversations that we're having, to kind of piggyback on Member Agnew's comments earlier. The conversation we had in our work session where we're looking at GIS data and really starting to ask questions. Well, what does that mean? How does it correlate? Having conversations about future for Edina. What do we need to be thinking about? What different things should we be doing? I just think those are the right conversations to be having. And I do know that I have worked with Stephanie Hawkinson, I've worked with MJ on some initiatives, but when people say, right, you need to be data driven, I think we really are trying to lean into what does that mean. We talked about transportation, same thing. We really want to lean into what does that mean to be data driven. And so I think they're the right conversations to be having. So definitely want to commend those efforts and urge those to continue. The second thing, we saw it on full display tonight, just some of the confusion in our processes. And some of that can be just chalked up to awareness. Just, oh, this is what the process is. And I think that is definitely fair. But there are instances where there may be some work that we need to do to kind of streamline things where it makes sense. And here again, I would say that city staff has been very receptive to having those conversations. The various commissions also have been very receptive to having those conversations. So that just, I'll use the phrase, it just feels good. Like we're not where we want to be with certain things just yet, but it feels like we're going in the right direction. And I think that's good. And then the third thing, just a personal thing, we in our yard have 3 ash trees, and one is ginormous in the backyard. We have a giant one in the front, and then one that's not so giant beside it. And when I say giant, like I couldn't give it a tree hug at all and touch the tips of my fingers. Well, while I was in Alabama, because I was visiting my dad this weekend, just the left side of the giant one up in front fell, and it fell into the street. And my neighbors across the street sent me a text message because I wasn't home, Steph wasn't home, and he asked, what do you want me to do? And he and another neighbor went over with a saw And I said, can you guys just just cut what you can so that it's at least is not in the street, because it is so big that you can't move it at all. And so we had someone come over today to look at it, and we're going to have to take that tree down because you can see the ash borer, and then then it has carpenter ants in it, and right where it collapsed, you could see the funnels from the carpenter ants. So, and it's so big, it extends over the house. It's a beautiful tree. And then the one next to that, which is probably a medium-sized tree, he looked at that one, same thing. So we're going to take both of those trees down, and we'll keep treating the one in the backyard. But hopefully we can save it. But the weird thing about us as humans, we tend to attach like an emotional, we have an emotional attachment to things that in our minds we think are living. But the science says we do it by size. And so you kill an ant, you don't think about that. And you cut your grass, you don't think about the blades of grass. You pluck a flower. If you think that flower is really beautiful and you want to look at it all season, it would bother you if somebody plucked that flower. Well, when that tree went down, I'm looking at it with my father, and he goes, you're going to have to take that down, because there's no way you can trim it so that if it continues to deteriorate, it won't fall on the house. And we just feel horrible about that, having to take those two trees down. And then we had a pine tree next to that one that was diseased, and we took that one down last year. So I don't know what I'm talking. It's just it's like therapy.
We're empathetic.
Right.
Change is hard.
Yep. So we feel horrible about it. And that one tree in the front yard has been there, I don't know how long, for years, multiple decades. And there were multiple families that had swings on that tree. We put a swing on it, and now there's a caution tape around it that nobody sits on that swing. So anyway, that I guess that's all I have.
Yeah,
that was enough.
We feel your pain, I guess. That's the tough one.
Yeah.
Those ash trees. Member Agnew.
So it pays to be your arborist, is what I'm hearing.
Yeah, it does.
So I want to kind of channel my, he's still a commissioner, Commissioner Lou Miranda, but former peer of mine on the Planning Commission. Because anytime there was record-setting temperatures or just the visibleness of climate change that we're experiencing, he would come to the Planning Commission and remind us all. And so we are early September of 2023, and we had a couple of extremely warm days here recently. And I think it's, again, just that reminder of, what Member Jackson was talking about, of why we as a city said we need to do more for climate change, right? I continue to look for ways. I love the climate action plan that we have. I love the steps that we're taking, because we need to take action as a city, and we can always do more. And it's fun to think how these roles that we all have here together helps to take those steps, right? When we look at how franchise fees are being used to invest in some of those changes that we're making as a city, it's just great to have that unfortunate reminder, right, that yes, the climate is changing, but to be in a position to affect, at least on the scale that we can as city council members, when we can. So, thank you.
Yeah, good. Thanks. For me, a couple of quick things to report out on. Attended the all-staff district kickoff on the 23rd over at the high school with Stacy Stanley, and that was nice to be able to be there and support the school district kickoff with all the teachers and staff for another year, and they were really enthusiastic, and so eager to support them, and was eager to support them, and it was great to be there. Nice to be included. And then we had the fire station open house the next day on the 24th. That place was just packed with people from, I think, mid-afternoon until early evening. And the guys at the fire station said that there had just been tons of kids through their families, just all over the place. And that's the first time I'd seen the inside of that ECMO mobile lab, right? If you want to call it a lab, it looks more like a surgery center, but it's really quite impressive. And then school-related, you've seen something in the paper about school resource officers and the issues around school resource officers, and Manager Neal and I are working on that. There's a letter going out, I think, from the MLC, the organization we belong to, that they're putting together that will ask the legislature to go back into special session to solve this issue so that we don't have, I think our police department was pretty comfortable, but still there's some areas where there's some risk exposure, I think, and we're trying to make sure that that doesn't happen. So when they're trying to do their job over there, they can do it risk-free for doing the right thing. Thanks to that announcement on the open house. And then lastly, but probably should have been at the top of the list, Lisa Schaefer, our assistant city manager, 25 years doing public service, and half of it here with us as the assistant city manager, and day in, day out, project in, it doesn't, countless projects, one after another. It just does superb work, and has been the kind of administrative person and leader of personnel at the management level for a town where we have 250, 300 full-time employees. Has just done a wonderful job for us, and now moving back over to the League of Minnesota Cities, where she was at one time, and going to be doing some work over there that's critical for that organization. But we're really going to miss you here, and all that superb level of competence that you brought to that job. And I know Manager Neal will really miss you a great deal, because he never had to worry about who was covering all of these things that he didn't have time to cover.
She always did my homework.
Yeah, it was always Lisa.
Yeah.
So thank you, and here. We wish you the best. Any thoughts about moving on to the next phase?
I have many thoughts. I will keep it short, and this might be the shortest council meeting that I've been at. This is a very difficult decision for me. I love it here at Edina. I know that everyone here is going to continue to do the great work that they always have, and I will still be able to help Edina and all other cities in a different role. So I appreciate all of the staff and leadership team and support from the mayor and city council throughout the years. I definitely have no regrets and would not have changed almost anything.
Yeah. Well, the league is so fortunate to have you come back over. We're really going to miss you. Thanks for those wonderful 12 years of service to our community. All right, Manager Neal, anything you wanted to add?
Yeah, for me, I was thinking the other day, I've worked with Lisa longer than any single employee I've ever worked with, right? So off and on over the past 20 years, since we kind of worked together in Eden Prairie in 2002 and all the way up till today. She is a person that I think from a council perspective, you'll never know really how much of the workload she bears kind of behind the scenes, because it's the nature of the work of a lot of assistant city managers, but particularly in Edina. That there's a lot of things happening as they kind of make their build-up way to the city council, and then I get to take it over the line, or Mr. Milner, or Mr. Teague. But we really are going to miss her expertise and her strength of character and all the things that she does here that don't get a lot of public observation or credit.
Yeah, thanks for that.
Yeah.
Okay, is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
Member Jackson moves, Member Agnew seconds that we adjourn the meeting of the Edina City Council on this 5th day of September 2023. All those in favor of adoption of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. We stand adjourned.